Thank you so much. So I'm just going to go through and introduce the rest of the panelists. I'll do a little piece and then I'll hand it over. So Catherine Biss, I'm going to go in alphabetical order. They chose to sit in that order. So I'll start with Catherine Biss. Catherine's been the CEO at Markham Public Library since 2002. Over her tenure, she's positioned the library as a community leader as well as an industry leader. MPL, or Markham Public Library, is known for its innovations in customer service, initiatives, library programs, and library technology. Catherine holds a master's in library science from University of Toronto and has dedicated her entire professional life to pursuing her passion for libraries. She's often shared the transformational experiences she has had as a child using her public library and developing a relationship with a children's librarian who never failed to engage her imagination and instill a love of books and libraries. Since her teens, Catherine's worked continuously in libraries, including in Brampton, North York, Peterborough, Richmond Hill, Ajax, before coming to MPL. Next, we have another Catherine with a K, Catherine Palmer. Over the long career with Toronto Public Library, Catherine Palmer has taken on numerous leadership roles in children and youth services, marketing, communications, branch management, and web development. She's the past president of OLA, or Ontario Public Library Association, and Catherine is currently Director of Planning, Policy, and E-Service Delivery at Toronto Public Library, and has led the project to develop the library's economic impact study, which you're going to be hearing about as part of the presentation. Andrew Martin to the end there. Andrew Martin is the Senior Project Director for the Centre for Equitable Library Access and is responsible for ensuring the April 1st start of the new public library-based service for print disabled. So we've gone public with April 1st, so we've got, we're gonna be waiting out for that date and hopefully it'll be, they will absolutely hit the date, sorry. He has a background in publishing, copyright licensing, news aggregation databases. In more recent work, he is a consultant and has had clients that include the Library Archives Canada, Canadian Heritage, NRC SISTI, University of Calgary Library, Athabasca University, and several publishing industry associations, university presses, and charities. And I've noticed he's already met a couple of folks that he knows from his past careers. Between 2006 and 2013, he's been on the board for the CNIB, the Canadian National Institute for the Blind Library. And last but not least, we have the data librarian from Martin Prosperity Institute at the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management. Got that out without stumbling. And Kimberly Silk is, I almost did the John Travolta. Kimberly Silk is responsible for the creation of and continuous improvement of a leading-edge data library, social knowledge network, and the physical collection. During her tenure at MPI, she has developed an appreciation for the study of prosperity and regional economic development and an interest in measuring the prosperity of public assets. She's the co-author of So Much More, The Economic Impact of Toronto Public Library on the City of Toronto, which was released in December 2013, and they're going to be talking about that as a part of their presentation. So I was told that I have to do a little presentation if I'm going to be up here, so I'm going to do a really quick presentation, and then I'm going to pass it on. So just to give some context, dispelling the myths. There's been this rumor, as you may have read in the write-up for the session, that libraries are on the decline. We have some statistics from the Canadian Urban Libraries Council. Catherine will give a brief, Catherine with a C will give a brief description, but Canadian Urban Libraries Council, or CULC, about 70% of the Canadian libraries are a part of that organization. So the stats you're seeing are not all Canadian libraries, but the majority of. So as you can see, as of 2012, 500 billion uses in that year occurred at the libraries. With annual open hours, we were hitting about 1.3 million open hours, and this is a combination of opening new branches as well as extending hours. Some libraries have actually extended the hours over weekends and into evenings. And the number of programs have also increased, and we're looking at about 175,000 programs offered a year, most literacy-based. I keep looking up there, but the coolest thing is they've actually got it down there as well. So Symbiotic Relationship, just to give it again some more context, this is a quick quote that came out of an article that was written in Forbes called Why Libraries Matter. And public libraries, and this is what we feel, and we're up here as partners with the publishing industry. So public libraries, oh, you know what, I'm not going to read it. Just read it. What it says is that we're a part of the environment, and we're here to work together to push reading and books and publishing forward. And we rely on you, and you rely on us, essentially. And you'll hear the rest of us talk about that as well. This is something that came out of, last year we did a presentation. We talked about ebooks, and what we talked about was how what we're seeing in our libraries is people coming into the library with their ebook readers still in the wrapper, still in the bag, and they're coming to our staff and saying, help me use it. Bill Gates figured this out back in the late 90s by introducing funding for libraries, millions of dollars of funding. TPL, Toronto Public Library got it, Markham Library got it, a lot of libraries across North America actually got it. And his intention was, well, if you know his vision was to put a computer, nowadays probably a laptop or a tablet, in everybody's home. And this was part of the plan, was to introduce technology through libraries, and the recognition that majority of the population who doesn't currently have technology, their first point of access is in a library. So that's where they're accessing it. So we're hoping that we can actually do that with ebooks and ebook readers. A lot of libraries actually lend out ebook readers, but we're thinking maybe there's an area there that we can use to help expand that use of technology. I'm going to throw a quick shout out, and the 2013 is coming out shortly, I understand. I think it's in April. But if you go through the 2012, and I suggest if you haven't picked up a copy of this, go out to the BookNet website. The 2012 is there, 2013 is coming out. It's a wealth of information. I pulled out just some of the library-related information, and this basically confirms what, again, you're going to hear from our panelists, but also we actually did a survey last year amongst our users, and essentially the question was something like, how does use of your library, or how does use of the library impact book buying? And there was a correlation. There's definitely a correlation, and it was comments like, you know, I'll find a copy of something I like in the library, and I purchase my own personal copy, or I'll start a series in the library, and then I'll go purchase additional copies, or if there's a book I like, and I purchase it for somebody else. So there's definitely a correlation between library usage and book buying as well. Interesting statistic here, where, and this is the 2012 study, 55% of the book buyers actually had been in their local library in the past month. So these are the individuals that were surveyed. And number 3, in terms of where they became aware of the book that they were purchasing, is libraries. I would actually argue that number 2, 12%, receive recommendations from friend or relative. We've got websites, Bibliocommons, if you've been on Toronto Public Library, and I think, or Markham Public Library and Toronto, we've got websites where our users are recommending books to each other. So I'd hazard a guess that of that 12%, there's some library action happening there as well. And my last slide before I hand it over, interestingly, I don't know if you knew this, I didn't know this until I actually started doing a bit of research through the study, but 6.6% of your book buyers out there are actually coming to the library with their books. So what we're going to do, because not all librarians are as open and cool as we are, so we're going to keep that amongst ourselves, because as soon as we put this out to the library world, you're going to get a sign that says, but we're not going to do that, so we're going to keep that our secret. But it was just, again, an interesting study, or a fact from the study, that libraries and book buying have a close connection. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Catherine and Kim.
Thanks so much, Mo. It's such a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon to discuss the results of our study, which we're very excited about. And as Mo mentioned, we just released it in December of this year, so we've been talking about it and sharing the information from it wherever we can. So I wanted to give you a little bit of the context of how we ended up doing the study, and then also talk a little bit about Toronto Public Library, because I have a chance to. Let me just say that many of you are familiar with Toronto Public Library. I don't know how many folks are here from Toronto or GTA area. Quite a few, yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so, and out of in province, but out of the neighborhood, handful and farther aflung. Yeah, so you may have heard about Toronto Public Library at some point or another, but we are one of the largest libraries in the world, and one of the busiest urban libraries in the world. And we have 98 locations. We have 2 other locations that are coming on stream, and we expect to have them up and running in the next 18 months. I think Mo alluded to something earlier, but I'll just tell you, we did a customer survey in the last couple of years, and 72% of Torontonians say that they visited a library in Toronto in the last year, and 1 in 6 say that they come weekly. So we have a lot of activity in our library, and that's reflected over the last decade. Library service, all the different uses of the library increased by almost 18%. Although use is shifting, so as might be expected, and I'm sure many of you are aware, of course, the use of e-content is expanding, but people continue to borrow material in a large variety of formats, and we purchase quite a range of formats to make sure we have accessible content, but also to suit people's needs. And probably a number of you in the room are big fans of audiobooks, and there's a lot of keeners who just want to read in or hear their books, and so formats are really important. Online self-service options are expanding, and access to learning through different ways, including a variety of programs. We have a pretty comprehensive suite of programs, and they're delivered to different age groups and on different topics. So that gives you a little context. Now let me just tell you a little bit about the study. So in terms of the study, it was really, sorry, next page. So why did we do the study? So we did the study because the general context is, and if you read the news, you would have observed this over the last few years, there's a great deal of interest in the public sector, in institutions and libraries, and to be sure that they're operating with greater accountability and transparency. There's a need to demonstrate value and not simply assume that there's value just by doing. There's an environment of fiscal constraint in which we are operating. There's an expectation of a prudent use of resources and a focus on shared outcomes, that public institutions had to work together and not in silos. We had many positive survey results from a variety of consultations that we did during this city's budget review periods, and we've had many reviews, including a core service review. And through that process, Torontonians came to understand that the library was ranked as one of the most important city services when compared to recreation facilities, public health, and so on. Over 90% of those surveys said that libraries were an extremely valued community resource. But aside from all these good impressions, which are certainly important, we didn't have the numbers to emphasize or underscore them. So a couple of things happened concurrently, and in the Toronto context, we heard in 2012 that the Municipal Governance and Finance group at the Monk School of Global Affairs, University of Toronto, was holding some talks that were on shared spaces, funding and managing libraries and parks in tough times. So what happened in a nutshell is that our board chair attended a few of these sessions. One, we had Martin Gomez from the City Librarian of Los Angeles, who came to talk about a significant budget increase that he achieved through the process at Los Angeles, a public referendum. And then Siobhan Reardon talked, she's the CEO of Philadelphia Library, and she came to speak about the work they'd done there. And then finally, Ed Erler, Executive Director of Millennium Park in Chicago, came to talk about how they worked in innovative ways to achieve and create a park that focused on innovation and partnership and park renewal. So all of those things came together in our board chair's mind and he made recommendations both at the board and city council that we conduct an economic study. So then I just wanted to mention that we did achieve funding for a study through our foundation. So the TD group was a huge and solid supporter of all of our literacy activities. And across Canada, you'll recognize that they are front and center in literacy causes and support of libraries. And we had an estate gift as well that got us going. And then we put a formal call into the marketplace for someone to conduct our study, talking to business schools, library schools, and consultants. And we engaged Martin Prosperity Institute to take on the study. The time period was very short, and it made for a very hectic summer. Usually the time frame for these studies is 1 or 2 years, and we had X number of months, so it was very intense. And now I'll just pass it on to Kim, who'll take you through the study itself.
So I'll just tell you a little bit about the Martin Prosperity Institute. It is kind of complicated because we're within the Rotman School of Management, at the University of Toronto. So we live on St. George Street, just across from Robarts Library, if you know the campus. We're really interested in studying 21st century capitalism, or democratic capitalism, thinking about how capitalism needs to change so that we're doing things that not only, help everyone's bottom line, but actually do this earth, that do our society good while we're making money. So we have 3 key researchers that lead our institute. Richard Florida he focuses on studying cities as the economic unit of the 21st century. We also have Roger Martin, who's the former dean of the Rotman Business School of Management, and then we also have Don Tapscott, who studies how networks can be used in order to think about solving big, hairy problems differently. All 3 of them quite prolific authors. And so I was able to become an author myself with this study, and it was co-written with my colleague, Dr. Stilaric, and worked really, really closely with Catherine and our colleagues at TPL. So in terms of what the study looks at, we are actually, the study evaluates what happens at the library. And we also value how the spending that the library system does, how that impacts the economy as well. And one thing that is really important to keep in mind in this study is that the values that we used are extraordinarily conservative. Even with the fantastic results that came out of all of the measurements, it's a very, very impressive number. Keep in mind it's still pretty conservative. I think we really blow it out of the water. So this is what I call the donut. This is an infographic that hopefully explains everything you kind of need to know about the valuation that we did. You'll see that the blue portion of the donut takes a look at the direct tangible benefits. These are all the things that happen in the library system that benefit the City of Toronto in terms of every single citizen, every single household. So as you can see, a good portion, more than half, is still collection use. And that covers not only the printed material, but e-books, audiobooks, and several different formats. So all the formats that Catherine mentioned that TPL acquires in order for use are represented in collection use. In addition to collections, materials are used in lots of other things that the library does in terms of programming, for instance. So the library uses a lot of publishing materials in their ESL programming, in the Learn to Read, Ready for Reading programs, all of the kindergarten and grade 4 outreach programs, all kinds of technology training. I mean, I can't even imagine, I know them all, these programs that the library does, and I can't list them all, but it's just constant at every single age of a library member, from infancy all the way up to our senior years. The library is there delivering programs, and publishing materials are a big part of that as well. Technology access is another important chunk. So people are coming into the library and they're using the Wi-Fi access, and then they're also using the computer terminals that are there in order to get done whatever they have to get done. And again, you have children coming in and using the computer hardware or using their own devices in the library. And you have it all the way up to entrepreneurs who are starting their own business and using the technology that's available, all the way to seniors who are learning how to do things for the first time. Maybe they're researching their family tree. They're doing all sorts of things having to do with hobbies. Reference and database services, another big chunk. These are all of the online services that we have access to. And we're able to access these not only at home and in the library as well. And so this is sort of a 24/7 service. And that goes for e-books and the electronic assets as well. Finally, one of the neat things that we did with the study that hadn't really been done with other studies that were done across North America was looking at how space in the library is used. As Catherine said, the way that we're using our library, the way that we're using our buildings is changing. We are dedicating more and more space to people using it for independent reading, group study, collaborative purposes, practicing music, doing all sorts of things. And again, the collection use comes into play there. People are coming to the library, taking something off the shelf and enjoying it, especially magazines are huge, and newspapers from various languages from around the world are a big piece of that, bringing in their own devices and using the technology and the Wi-Fi. and all sorts of things. So you can see that the beautiful number here is that there's over $1 billion in total economic impact for the City of Toronto. And you can break that down per household for $9.55 per household, or at the individual level, just over $350 for every single Toronto citizen. In terms of looking at the benefits of library membership, this one is where we took a look at how we took the 72% that Catherine measured. So we know that 72% of Torontonians have used the library in the past year. We apply that to the value, the $1 billion for the whole City of Toronto, and it comes down to $502 per member. We all know that you can use the library without necessarily needing a library card. So even though it's a very beautiful, pretty card picture up there, we didn't use it based on card holders, but rather the entire City of Toronto that are part of the library community as members. And finally, the one specific thing that we were asked to measure was the value of an open hour. So what we ended up doing is we took the value of all of the things that you can do in the library while the library is open. So we had to take away reference and database services, and we had to take away ebooks because those are 24/7 services. And everything else that happens in the library, that if you go back to the donut and see everything that's happening in the library, and we divide it by the number of hours that the library is open, you can see that these are the results that we got. So the average cost of an open hour, not one specific open hour in a specific branch, but the average cost of an open hour across the entire system is $653. And of course, is just over $2,500. But the cost to keep that library open for an hour is just $653. I love this measurement. These are just getting down to some more details. The report contains all of these things if you're interested in this level of detail. But this slide just shows that the estimates that we're using are midpoint estimates, that even our high estimates are still rather conservative. In terms of return on investment, everyone loves the term ROI. I'm not crazy about it because I think it's misleading, but the ROI is for 463. In other words, Catherine, that for every dollar spent, it's $5.63. That's the value there. So I will turn it back over to Catherine, who's going to talk a little bit more about the intangible benefits.
So we've told you a little bit about the numbers, and just to build on what Kim said, the other thing that we assess is the direct spending that happens at the library through our spending on our staff and through our spending on the publishing industry and to purchase our collections. And there's a value that's attributed to that. And then there's what they call the indirect spending, which is when the employee or people who we fund through our renovation program, for instance, contractors or architects or whatever, when they spend the money. So they call that the multiplier spending. So all of those things are packaged into the assessment of the economic benefit. But one thing we did talk about quite a bit in our study was about the intangible benefits. And you can see here there's we know we deliver value that are beyond the numbers and that we didn't have the capacity to assess it through this particular study. And those are in the areas of things like employment support, small business supports, the effect of all of the work that we do, all of the programming and activities around literacy and emerging literacy as well as adult literacy, and or what we do for programming. So we've never done an assessment, for instance, of all of the book-related programming that we engage in to promote reading, a love of reading and learning. And we engage at a national level through the National Reading Campaign to promote reading sort of generically as a good thing. And that's really written into the mission statements of many a library. So those things all contribute, we think, to improved quality of life. And one of the things about the library in Toronto that we wanted just to touch on very briefly is because we have so many branches, we are in neighborhoods across the city. And as the population ages, we create an environment in particular where we position people to be able to live more successfully in place because they can go to the local library, and that level of activity helps people become and sustain a vital in life. And then that's just speaking of the older adult, but also children and buggies, strollers going to the neighborhood. Those things all create a very strong community hub and neighborhood network that makes a city strong and builds the vitality and economic prosperity of a city. So one quick slide about our observations. We realized through the process, although we have a tremendous amount of data, we need more. And I guess that's probably a common theme in publishing as well. You can sort of never have enough knowledge about what it is your clients, your customers, or your patrons are interested in. So we recognize that we need to do more work on valuation and big data applications, data mining, and program evaluations, maybe structure some longer term programs so we can talk about those outcomes. Just ever so briefly, public libraries are really and have always been very built upon a responsiveness principle. And as I mentioned earlier, our mission statements often refer to responding to the changing needs of our residents. And that, I think, positions us well because we're recognizing that importance, and that helps us to adapt our spaces. So we've, in Toronto, done a lot of renovating to create flexible spaces for 21st century libraries, and Kim talked about the different uses that people are making of our libraries. And similarly, online, we know they want to do more things for themselves, and also they want to contribute and create content to be included in our collection, so that's a big emerging area for us. So we know we want to do more work on enhancing digital library, transitioning to cloud-based services, new ways of building collections, and new collections are in our plans. Our strategic plan for Toronto Public Libraries 2012 to 2015 includes such themes. We have the themes read, learn, create, and deliver, and under those are strong intents to expand the digital frontier and promote online discovery, make more e-learning tools available, and helping people with technology and emerging tech trends. You may know we've just opened our digital innovation hub at our Toronto Reference Library, and we have more coming on stream as well as other opportunities to expose people to technology. So this helps to support creators, innovators, and entrepreneurs of all ages. So just in closing, I want to just acknowledge the fact that it was a great engagement with MPI, and although we both worked very hard on the project, I think we had a good outcome, and I thank you for your time and attention on this.
Thank you, Catherine and Kim. We're going to switch over now to Catherine and Andrew to talk about the Center for Equitable Library Access.
Martin and I are very pleased to be here today to tell you about this very new initiative. And in fact, you are the first non-library group that we have actually spoken to about this. So you're going to hear the infancy of this new concept. Before I begin, though, I would really like to say that both Martin and I, and in fact all librarians everywhere, and I hope the world recognizes the importance of publishers and the need for their success. I know it's been a very turbulent last few years. We understand that, and we're very supportive of what you. Why are we flipping?
It's probably just shaking.
Okay, all right, good. There's not an earthquake happening or anything? No. Okay, good. We have a vested interest in supporting the health and prosperity of your business. We've always believed that our role is to preserve your content and to help customers discover the wealth of product that you provide to us. We believe that having access to content necessitates that we use it responsibly. As we have in the past, we will continue to seek out partnerships in the publishing industry to find seamless ways to make our content available. So, who or what is CULC and who do we represent? The organization represents chief executive officers of communities that serve over 100,000 population. We have 43 members. We provide public library service out of 650 outlets. In 2012, we were used by citizens more than 385 million times. We expended in excess of 100 million on materials and employed 12,000 Canadians. So we believe we have an impact, and as you can see from our expenditures, we depend on you for the main product that we have in our buildings. The other things that CULC does are things like the social inclusion audit, where we looked at how libraries could bridge the gap between the rich and poor by not only providing materials, but through supporting the development of literacy skills. We also produce metrics annually that allow us to benchmark our success in terms of what we're doing individually. And as well, we just this, I guess it was in February, we graduated our first class of the Public Library Leadership Fellows Program. This is an innovative executive leadership program designed by the membership and delivered in partnership with the iSchool at the University of Toronto. It's really all about developing future library leaders, because we all know the baby boom generation is about to retire, and we want to be sure there are strong leadership skills within our libraries that can carry on after we're gone. A few statistics about the print-disabled environment next. There are 3.4 million, or 10% of Canadians, that have some form of print disability. And print disability examples are blindness, age-related macular degeneration, glaucoma, diabetic retinopathy, or an impairment related to comprehension, like learning disabilities, autism, brain injuries, or the inability to hold or manipulate a book through arthritis, multiple sclerosis, or Parkinson's disease. 7% of internationally published material is available in formats for people with print disabilities, and 5% of Canadian published materials available in format that is used by people with disabilities. Now there's a long, oh, that's interesting. Oh, it's going to come up one at a time. I'm using someone else's slideshow, so I'll just keep pushing the button. This is lots of fun. Okay, I think we're down to, so I'm not going to read off or tell you the sad stories of what happened over all those years. But basically, in 2011, the Canadian Library Association and Library and Archives Canada had a group task force that was known as CELA. And when that was disbanded, basically the whole topic of services for the print disabled was thrown back to the CNIB. Now, for those of you who don't know, Canadian National Institute for the Blind is a charitable organization that basically provides all the services for the print disabled in the country, or for the blind. They've been providing library services for as long as I can remember. So basically what the CNIB did was they created, there it is, Reading Reimagined, a national digital hub concept. Again, they went out on a road trip trying to sell the idea to government and basically every institution they could talk to. And again, they were more or less turned down. They brought the issue, and I remember John Rafferty coming to our meeting. I was chair at the time of CULC. And all of us were quite stunned by the fact that no one was willing to step forward to deal with services for the print disabled. And we made a motion at that time that basically we decided that it was up to us as public libraries to change this sad picture and to take ownership of the issue. So we also made it very clear that it was inappropriate that a charitable organization really had to be the only organization that would provide reading materials for the disabled. And so we also resolved that we would find a way to form an organization that would help us take on the service in our branches. We hired Martin, and libraries like to do things quickly. Within, this is 5 months now, I believe, Martin, we will have a service up and running, but I'm going to let Martin talk about some of that in a minute. Our principles, let me just, I don't know if these ones are going to come up individually too. Oh, no, we got them together, but I got them too fast. No? Okay, that's all right.
I'll take it. Oh,
I think, do you want to do it?
yeah, I'll take over.
Yeah, thanks. I'm pressing too hard. Okay. Basic principles of the discussions we had as we started to get this formulated is that access had to be equitable, and that really the issues for us were, it wasn't about anything other than developing collections and providing services. And why would we treat the print disabled any differently than we would any other consumer or customer of our services? While we hope that the services could be funded through government funding, public libraries really ought to expect to pay for the content the same way we pay for any content via direct purchase or by a subscription, and that any solution we would come up with had to leverage the dollars and the significant investment that had been made at the CNIB in terms of production, access, distribution, and technology. So working together, public libraries and the CNIB, we believe, can provide even better service. And we also believe that the services of the new organization must be available to all public libraries, small, rural, First Nations, with no physical barriers or financial barriers to participation. We believe it needs to happen as soon as possible, and that basically the print disabled community has waited long enough to receive direct service. And at the bottom line is that the service has to be at least as good as what the CNIB is currently providing. Andrew, would you like to speak to CELA, which this is the, what is this?
Solution.
Solution, thank you.
Sure. CNIB Library historically came into its forefront nearly 100 years ago, and largely to deal with people who had lost their sight during the First World War. That was its principal clientele. So if you like, it really existed to address a kind of market failure, because what people needed in that situation, is that better? Can you hear better now? Was Braille, and clearly the public library system could not, and in fact still cannot, produce books in Braille. What's changed, of course, is technology, and in more recent years, the majority of what the CNIB library pushes out are DAISY-formatted audio books, and increasingly these are being delivered not by CD, mailed to the client's home, but direct to device or direct to player. Coming up behind that, as Catherine said, is the growing feeling that people who have print disabilities should not rely on a charity to receive public library service. And whether you ground that in charter arguments, whether you just say it's plain common sense, doesn't really matter, because what the CNIB decided, having consulted very widely, was that, you know, as its CEO said, we need to get out of the library business, and there are things that CNIB can do as a charity, and providing library services is not one of them. So about a year ago, I would think, the decision was made that they would now formally begin a transition, a long-term transition of CNIB library services to the public library system. The challenge was, and to some extent still is, how do you actually do that? The answer at this point was to create the Centre for Equitable Library Access, which is a library managed, if you like, go-between that will work with the CNIB on the one hand as a service provider, and the public libraries on the other hand, on the other side, to actually deal with patrons. And I say long-term, it's long-term for a number of reasons. One is the CNIB library still has something like 30,000 members. Many of these are elderly. I mean, to some extent, this reflects the CNIB demographic and when people come to the CNIB, but most of them are over 60 and a lot of them are over 70. Some may want to transition to working through their public libraries, most will not. And to put it bluntly, when you've got a demographic of that age, there will obviously come a point when, if no new members are accepted, fewer will be served directly by the CNIB library. So part of this involves trying to persuade those 30,000 people gradually to move to take alternate format access through their public library, but they're not going to be forced to. Alongside that, the CNIB library, as of March 31st, will accept no new members. Anyone who is a CNIB client who wants library service after that date will be referred to their public library. And what CELA has been doing is setting up the processes that will make that comfortable and simple, because you're dealing with people, some of whom have encountered vision loss late in life. Clearly you can't say, well, I'm sorry, go figure it out. So a lot of work has gone into designing a registration process with what we're calling a soft handoff that will enable the 3,000 or 4,000 people a year who come to the CNIB to be referred to their public libraries. At the same time, CELA will devote resources to enabling public libraries to promote more widely their ability to offer alternate formats within their community. So the expectation is that the clientele, if you like, would be partly referrals from the CNIB, partly people coming from within their own community, and people who would never, for a number of reasons, have gone to the CNIB. This will all take time. The feeling, as Catherine said, is the CNIB has huge expertise in creating alternate format materials. It's been doing it for over 100 years, 116 years, I think. It has a very substantial capital investment, which was funded in no small measure by the federal government. It's got people who have skills you're never going to find anywhere else. It produces materials not just in both official languages, but in some other languages. It produces materials for First Nations libraries. So obviously what we want to do within CELA is find a way to retain and build on that expertise. So part of what CELA will do is manage a service contract with the CNIB, and the CNIB will therefore do most of what it does now, but under contract for CELA. Public libraries will participate in this, and they'll do it in a number of ways. Some provinces will provide funding that covers everyone in the province who needs alternate format materials. Some will not, for a number of reasons. Where a province declines to offer funding, libraries within that province will be asked if they want to subscribe individually. The CULC libraries, which as Catherine said are generally in localities with 100,000 people or more, have mostly indicated, in fact I think nearly all indicated, that if necessary they will do this. I mean, they prefer not to, it's not built into their funding, but they will cover everyone within their population base. And CULC libraries serve about 60% of the population. In some provinces more. In BC, for instance, it's 72% of the population is served by a CULC library. Other libraries may or may not subscribe. The very smallest libraries, it's felt, which have the tiniest budgets, if their province isn't funding, CELA will try and move money around the board in a way which enables them to be covered anyway. The federal government is likely to provide funding, but this is complicated by the fact that the service responsibility is moving from the CNIB to CELA. And although there is some federal funding that will flow into the 2014-2015 year, CELA will probably need to make its own application to the federal government at some point in the next few months. The CNIB, although it intends to withdraw from offering or funding or financing library service, has said that it sees this as a medium to long-term transition. And if need be, it would cover 100% of the costs in year one, although we expect it to be somewhere in the region of 60-65% in the first year and gradually reducing. So there's an awful lot of moving parts in all of this. I want to reiterate what Catherine said. The goal here is not to have CELA doing things that interfere with publisher markets. And this is a key concern. The Copyright Act contains an exception that allows non-profits to produce alternate format materials, but only when there isn't a commercially available alternative. So we will talk with the publisher groups over the next year or so to get a sense of whether the materials that are going to be produced in any way conflict with publishing plans, and if they don't, whether there are ways in which, and this really picks up on the point that people who need alternate format materials should not be disadvantaged relative to the cited population, whether perhaps there are ways we can reduce the time that it takes to produce works in alternate format. At the moment, it can take up to a year. The goal, I think, would be to shrink that at least to 6 months. And that clearly involves building up very good, trusted relationships with the people who are producing the material so that they will feel comfortable sharing files, in some cases prior to publication. And on the other hand, CELA will use its government funding to invest in expedited production processes. So very simply, that's what CELA is about. It is, as I say, an interface between the producers of alternate format material and the library sector, which will in future be the primary point of contact with someone who needs those services. And it will endeavor to produce materials in whatever format people require. The funding remains to be nailed down. It will come, but it's in a little bit of a state of flux. CELA itself will have minimal operating costs. I mean, clearly there will be a need to manage the service contracts. There will be communications expenses, but overall the goal is to reduce the cost of providing these materials to the print disabled community. I think that's probably all I can usefully say, Catherine.
Sorry, yes, and we've actually run out of time.
Run out the clock as well.
If you do have questions, we'll stand to the side to allow the others who are presenting after us to come up and set up. But if you do have any questions, we'll just stand to the side. Apologies for going over. I'll take responsibility for going long at the beginning. And if you do have any questions, again, we'll be at the side. Thank you for joining us.